Welcome back to Great Lakes Junction, everyone.
Hi guys.
Time to do another reno in a room. This time it's the living room and dining room area. So we're going to do a complete makeover in here. We're getting rid of this old rose-colored carpet. It's going to come out and we're putting in a vinyl laminate flooring. Our trim that has currently been stained and varithined to brown color is going to get changed to white. The wall's going to go from an olive to a gray color. And hopefully it'll look okay when we're all finished. And a couple of other things we want to do. This thermostat, it gets a little wonky with the heat coming off of this flat screen TV. So we're thinking about trying to relocate it. Okay, so where we're at, we've removed the carpet, the underpad, all of the baseboard trim. We've gone through and pulled staples that were holding the underpad down. We've gone over the floor with a vacuum cleaner and carried a hammer with us, so anytime we hit a nail that was sticking up, we pounded the nail back in. So now we've chosen to go with putting a new 5/8 tongue and groove plywood subfloor down over top of this for two reasons. One, this floor does have some movement in it. This is the original subfloor that we're looking at, 5/8 thick, that's all it is. So we're going to go over it, take out the movement, and also when we did the tile out here in the kitchen, with the cement backer board and everything, you can see better there on the door trim, we added about 1 inch or more to that floor. And it's a really high transition. I had to custom make one for it. So with the 5/8 plywood going down and the flooring material on top, hopefully it'll bring that back up to a more traditional size threshold. So our next step now, we got to figure out where the floor joists are underneath here. So when I put the new plywood down, I want to make sure I'm screwing it down into the floor joist and not just this 5/8. If this plywood's already moving that's here and you don't go through it and catch a floor joist, it's just going to move again with the new stuff on top. So we'll probably do some chalk lining in here so we know where things are. There's 2 rooms below this in the basement, and somewheres in this area across here, there's a steel beam underneath, and the floor joists on one side of the steel beam compared to the other side are not straight end to end. They overlap at that point where they sit on the steel beam. So we'll have to figure out exactly where they are so we know where we're screwing stuff down to. So we're just doing a rough layout here of our new plywood subfloor. So we've got a piece of door trim here, and height wise we're not going to be able to slip this material under it. Now you may have a saw, that there are some saws made with blades that are reciprocating and they'll just cut that off. I don't have one of them saws, so I've got the plywood, my finished floor product, and I've just pencil marked where it needs to be for height. I'll pull this material back out of the way and I'll just cut that off with a handsaw. Okay, so what I'm doing here, I've put a chalk line down. This chalk line is where the steel beam is below this floor. So from the wall to the first floor joist on that side of the beam, it starts 7 inches off the wall. And on this side of the steel beam, the floor joists are 6 inches or so off of the wall. So now I'm going to measure 16 inches on center from each of these marks going across. And I'll do the same thing down at the other end off the wall. And then I'll snap chalk lines from that end down to this line, or down to this end. And then we'll know where our floor joists are to be putting our screws in. So we laid out our chalk lines. Hey, puppy. So we laid out our chalk lines and we put them over top of the floor joists so I knew where they were when I was putting the screws in the subfloor. And we only did a little area, and we stopped using the chalk line because the puppy dog started to get orange paws walking around in here. So the rest of it we just used a pencil and put the lines on the floor with a pencil. I used 2.5-inch flooring screws where the floor joists are to get a good solid bite. And then in between the joists I just used 1.25-inch flooring screws, so I didn't want a whole bunch of screws sticking way down through the floor when you went down to the basement and looked up. And we had a couple of spots. I'll turn the camera around a bit. So we had 2 areas where there was a drop from the end of this sheet of plywood to that sheet of plywood. And the drop, it wasn't huge, it was maybe 2 millimeters, but the flooring I'm putting in is only 4 millimeters, so it's half the thickness of the flooring. And there was no reason for it other than an inconsistency in the thickness of the plywood. I didn't want to take the risk on having my flooring coming across and there being a seam on or near this, because the lip on that flooring I'm installing is so fine, if you walked on it, it'd just snap it off. So I used some thin set mortar that I had left over from a previous job to spread that out and fan it in a little bit to take care of that. So that should support my flooring going across without any more issues. So it was just a couple of spots that I had to do this in, one here and one down near the other end. The rest of it was fine. So we're ready to start installing this flooring. So I went ahead without filming and I got my starter row in all the way down from one end of the room down to the other end. So I could do my cutouts in my doorways and things like that. Now I did find, as you typically do in any house, they're not square. So the manufacturer calls for a 3/8 space between the wall and this flooring material. Now I'm making my own decision that I'm not going the full 3/8. It's up to you whether you follow that or not. The reason for it, this is a piece of the baseboard that I took off. It's 3/8 of an inch thick. So if I'd come off the floor with that 3/8 of an inch, you could see a hairline gap between this and the flooring. And if it does move, any expansion or contraction, especially if it shrinks away from this, you're going to see a gap there. I could have put another piece of 1/4 round trim on this when I was finished to take care of that. I didn't really want to do that either. So I decided to drop down to a 1/4 of an inch spacing between the flooring and the wall. So this will cover it up just that little bit. It'll still allow some movement without seeing a crack down beside this. Now this is not a wood product, this is vinyl. So I don't see that it's going to absorb the moisture with climate changes between winter and summer and have a lot of that movement to begin with. But the manufacturer did say 3/8 and I'm not following that rule. So this wall has some crookedness to it. It's not perfectly straight. Most of it's a 1/4 of an inch gap. The only place that's not is right here. It's down to more of an 1/8 of an inch gap. And from that doorway to that corner, just that little distance, we're just a hair under the 3/8 here, and we're 1/8 over there. So that's how crooked that piece of wall is. Now I'm confident that where I have that first row is where I want it. So to try and ensure I'm going to be square going across the room, I measured from this first row of flooring across to the opposite wall at both ends of the room, and I have the exact same measurement. So I'm happy with that. The placement of this working across the room, it'll come out, it'll be straight, nothing will look crooked. The only other thing I'm going to change, they always tell you when you're installing this, of course you don't want any of your joints to line up. So you're never going to put a full board and a full board and have the seams in the same location. So I started with a full board here from the corner, which comes out to here. My next one, I cut it in half. So the next one starts at the wall and it comes out to half of that first board. And we continue on. Now from there they tell you, okay, so the next row is going to be another full board, start with a half board, full board, and so on. I'm not going to do that. It gives you a brick wall effect. If you have a transition in the coloring, such as we do here, so you can see one board's quite a bit darker than the other board. I don't know I don't know how often that'll happen. That is how many changes there is between light and dark where I'm going to have that sort of a noticeable transition in color. But if you do it the way they tell you to, starting with a half sheet and then a full sheet and continue that way, this line will always be in the same spot in every other row. And if you have a lot of these types of transitions, it's going to look like you're looking at a brick wall. So I'm going to vary the length of my starting pieces so that the seams, not only will they not line up with one another, but they won't line up as a brick wall pattern either. Last thing, this is the knife, a video from the manufacturing company. This is the type of blade that they tell you to use to cut this stuff. Absolutely useless. I tried. It barely scratches the surface on this floor, which is good, but you can't score it and then snap it the way they tell you to. They actually show a guy doing it. I don't know if he pre-cut it deeper than what you see in the video or how, but I've tried it and it does not work. They tell you do not use a saw on your flooring. Being as that knife didn't work, I went to my table saw with this stuff. Cuts absolutely fine. I had no chipping, no splintering, didn't affect the saw, so the saw is the way I'm going. Up to you, you can make your own decision on, you know, whether you use a saw or whether you try and use the knife, but I can't get that knife to work to cut this stuff. So we'll go ahead and we'll start putting more of this down. You really do have to hit that quite hard to pop them together. I looked at the installation tools they have. They're just plastic. And I thought I could get away with making my own. Turns out I cannot. So basically, this is a bigger block of wood than what you would have if you bought them. But you see that lip that's on here? So the plastic one, it's straight on the bottom. Plastic piece like this that has that lip to it, and that is the same thickness as the flooring is. So it sits down, grabs the flooring, hit it with a hammer, and it pops it apart, pops it into place. It just broke that lip off on this, and this is a piece of hardwood, so you do have to hit it quite hard. So I'm just going to go ahead and use the block, just putting it straight against the wood and just hitting the block, not worry about having the lip hanging over the top, and we'll see if it still works. Okay, I brought the camera down here to try and get a close-up. One of the things they do not tell you in any of the instructions is how to make sure this end goes together all right. Now I found out I broke two of them when I put my block of wood at the other end and was trying to hammer it this way. And the reason I had them so that this, I had them so that this long board was fitted nicely into this groove, and I had a gap here. And when I was hammering it down with my block, when it came into contact with this, it broke this lip off on the end of this sheet. So what I have found, when you put this sheet on and you're lining this one up and clipping it in, overlap this one as much as you can. Now we can overlap even more than that. So I'm overlapped about half of the width of the material that's there. And this joint is nice and tight, just the way it should be. Now I can hammer that down and it seems to go together fine without breaking it. The only thing, I don't know if, Joe here, I don't know if that you can see that on the camera or not. This corner is up just slightly because now you're sitting on top of that plastic underneath it and it should clip in underneath sort of. So it wants to kind of pop itself up. So that's why you see me spreading out and putting one foot to kind of hold that down while I'm hammering it. And we have a nice tight, smooth joint. Seems to work out very well. It's not breaking anything. One more thing I wanted to show you that I've come across now. The other thing I wanted to show you, when you get down to the end and you're up against this wall, they would have you clip this one into this end like that, put your block of wood here and hammer it this way for this edge to clip together. Now that might work on a short piece like this, but I tried it with a longer piece, like 24 inches, a half a board, and there's no way, it didn't matter how hard I hit it, I couldn't get that whole 24-inch lip to slide in and lock into place. So what I've started doing, and I'll continue to do because it's working good, so this last one I put in, just kind of jiggle it loose so this side comes unclipped. Line that up so it's nice and straight, so it's clipped together. Now just put that back in there as if it was one extra long board. All of our seams are flat, nothing is sticking up or catching. It's working just perfect for me putting it together that way. So that's what I'm going to continue doing on these ends when I get down to them. So I'll just continue on laying the boards. The table saw cuts this stuff fine, so I'm almost done this job. Time to show you that I am using the table saw. Now this piece where I'm putting this one, I want it 4 inches wide down to this point. Then I only want it 3 7/8 wide. This is in front of those double doors that go outside to the deck, and this is in front of the drywall. So I want it a little bit tighter at the bottom of the doors than I do up against the wall of the house. So that's why I have to change it partway through. Definitely got to put earplugs in. This is a lot noisier cutting this than it is if you're cutting wood. So there's my 4-inch width there, and then I moved it over just another 1/8 of an inch. So this is only 3 7/8. This will give me the extra clearance that I wanted on my wall. But as you can see, that cuts just fine on the table saw. It's a nice smooth edge. It's not chipped up or anything. So we have the floor installed done. Furniture is still a little bit of disarray because now we're moving it around to get ready to do painting yet. So primarily this was about installing the floor, so I'm not going to videotape a lot of the painting because painting is painting. But we will come back before we finish the video and just do an after shot, I guess, of the transformation of this room. We mentioned at the very beginning we were going to move the thermostat from this location where it was above the television. So we have it moved. I was hoping to move it down to the left side of that doorway there, but below that is where the furnace actually is in the basement, and I just couldn't get at anywhere to drill a hole to get wiring up through for the thermostat. So instead, we just swung it around the corner of this doorway and put it in the front hallway. So I'm waiting for my patchwork here to dry up so I can sand it off and we'll be ready to do the painting. Upcoming video on putting that vinyl material on the windows. There's our new flooring. Turned out very well. Very happy with how it turned out. And that spot where the thermostat used to be on the wall, we relocated it, patched it up. Turned out good. So that concludes this project. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you found some useful information.